need to be vulnerable and we need to trust in one another. And if you can find a group, a department, a grade level, a partner, whoever that you can do that with, you need to hang on to that PLN with all your might, because that's how you grow.
Okay, no swearing.
Try my best, no promises. I'm not very good at that. I stay in education because I believe in it. I think there's something for it, but I don't think it needs to fit into the nice little package that we fit it into.
So last night, I had the immense pleasure of talking with Jen Giffen. She is a DLRT, or a digital literacy resource teacher, working in Ontario, Canada. And in the pursuit of talking about changes in education, we talked about the power of mentorship, gratitude between teachers, and somehow near the end of the conversation, we managed to talk about aliens. Chasing Squirrels Podcast is all about trying to find out about those interesting and powerful changes that can happen in education to both workers inside and outside the box. I had a blast talking with Jen. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Enjoy. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Chris.
Okay. I'm well. Thanks. So, Chasing Squirrels Podcast. So the title Chasing Squirrels, I'll tell you the story right off the top end. Easily 12, 13 years ago, living in downtown Toronto, and my spouse told me a story about taking the dog for a walk, and my dog somehow grabbed a squirrel right off a tree. So, yeah, I know. And so in grabbing the squirrel off the tree, my dog really did, basically the squirrel, it rotated one way, my dog decided to go the other way, and somehow on the back side of the tree, all of a sudden my spouse came around to the other side to see my dog just like holding down this little screaming rodent. And my dog was surprised. I think the squirrel was surprised. And I think that, I know actually my spouse was freaking out. So this story, the squirrel got away. I'll tell you, the squirrel got away. But this story, it's kind of stuck with me. I have to be honest, it stuck with me because I can't say how many times that I've actually, you try to corner the squirrel. Who hasn't tried to get the better of a squirrel around a tree?
Yeah. I've
never been able to grab one. So I think this thing has stuck in my mind for three reasons. One, something like that, grabbing the squirrel, I would love to be able to do. I would love to be able to be that agile to be able to do it.
Like Mr. Miyagi with the chopsticks and the fly.
You got it. Barehanded squirrel grabbing. Again, something that I might have to edit out just by saying that. So what stuck with me, what still sort of carries with me is the fact that I'm sure the squirrel didn't know what the hell was going on. My dog didn't know what it had done. And my spouse is observing this complete oddity. Like, how does that even happen? Right. And it just, when I was thinking about what I wanted to focus on, or what I thought would be interesting, the interesting stories is that moment of change for obviously the squirrel and their mortality, and my dog, this is a new thing, and my spouse, how am I going to separate these two animals? I started thinking about, I don't even know how I made the connection, but thinking about work and thinking about how when change happens in our workplace, I don't think it's as simple as saying, are you the squirrel? Are you my dog? Are you the person observing it?
Right.
But there's something there that I'm looking to unwind with this podcast. So with that's the backstory. The second thing I wanted to tell you is that how you've sort of changed me. So what your impact on my teaching or just existing in education. And it was interesting. Do you remember, how did we meet?
I remember meeting you at tech camp.
Just like 2 months ago.
Yeah, in October. And I felt this instant connection. I really like this Chris Clough guy. He's a really cool dude. You meet people and you just feel like you've known each other. That's how I felt. I have a friend who has a theory that she went to one of those angel reader things, and they explain when that happens, this theory, if you believe it, and it makes sense to me. I don't know if I believe this, the actual full essence of the theory is, it means that in some alternate dimension or in another life or whatever it happens, if you're Buddhist, I guess, like in the past life, you were connected somehow. You were somehow related. Like maybe you were my mom or something like there's souls, those people that you instantly feel that connection to. It's because you've been connected before.
I like that.
And that's how I felt. I did too.
That.
I was like, that's kind of neat that, and there are other people that just instantly you're like, there's something about you that we just get each other. And when I met you, I felt like we'd known each other for a long time, even though we hadn't. I felt very comfortable.
Yeah. It's funny that, in talking to other people that you spend the predominant amount of time getting to know people on social media and digitally, and then you get the chance to meet people in person. I would say you definitely fill all the space in sort of like my head as far as how you sort of exist in social media and how you exist in real life. And there's a nice,
that's nice. Thanks.
Well, it's completely true. And I think this is, when I think about the impact that you've had on, I'll say it's not so much on my teaching, but I think it's on me as a teacher, is that I've been doing a lot of thinking about the necessity of taking risk and sort of pushing. I'm completely done with the pushing beyond boundaries, but just the idea of pushing through the fear and sort of taking your fear with you. And I found myself saying that a lot to my colleagues. They're saying, I don't want to try this. I don't know. I just don't know. I said, well, take that emotion with you, but do it anyways.
Yeah.
And that was completely that I took from you, and sort of like what seemed to be sort of your focus in sort of getting through your stuff. Because I actually went back and I did find actually what our first tweets were. And it was
because I definitely knew you on social media before I met you in person. Maybe that was part of it too.
But what's interesting, we didn't tweet until early November, when there was a very quick conversation about standing desks.
Oh, I love standing desks. I want one so badly.
As do I. I made my own actually in class. I don't have them. I've actually asked around to get them. But that was our first sort of professional interaction that was digital only. And since then we've had a few, but I think it's almost like I feel like we're official now in the sort of PLN world. We're sort
absolutely.
Of like, we could sort of move forward with something at some point.
I was only remotely kidding when we went out that night to Finn's, and I said, that's my Twitter bestie. I was like, because that's what we do, like all the time. I'm like, I'll just ask Clough, and I get on Twitter. Like, that's where I find you.
Totally agree. So what I want to do, I want to ask you, I'm going to give you some starters, and I'd love to hear how you'd finish the sentences. Okay. So try this one. Before I became a teacher,
before I became a teacher, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I was teaching anyway. I was a teacher. Before I was a teacher, I was a teacher. I wanted to teach forever. No matter what I've been doing, I've always taught. And I go back, and a lot of my life is not necessarily around teaching. Like, I worked for StatScan around census time. I was a bartender. I was a camp counselor and camp director for a long time. I worked at Indigo. That was one of my favorite jobs. But in all of those, it was about imparting knowledge on other people. I love to learn, and I love to be with people who are learning. So yeah, before I was a teacher, I was a teacher. I've been me forever. And I've always said, I don't know what my life will be like when I retire, because all of a sudden I won't be able to say I'm a teacher. And I'll probably be at an age where my red hair will start fading if it goes anything like my ginger predecessors and my grandfather and my great aunt. I'll be this sort of like very light shade of, I don't know, it's not gray, it's this weird light ginger. But it'll be weird for me not to be a redheaded teacher, because to me that's who I am, other than like being a mom and being a wife and being a cheerleader. That's who I am. That's
awesome. Okay, try this one. I stay in education because
I believe in education. So I've said a lot, and not disrespectfully, in the last couple of years, education is broken. It's broken, and it really needs to be fixed. But I say that in the same breath where I say I do believe in it, and I do believe we're going to get there. And I think it goes back to, we've talked about this earlier, that whole Sandra comment about, the best PD is the one where you leave knowing less than when you arrived. I think I don't know if it's that I'm in a part because I'm at the halfway point of my career, right? Like I'm 16 in and I have about 16 to go, that I'm realizing, okay, I've lived through a lot of it. I've towed the company line. I've lived the status quo, and now I'm starting to see my horizons broaden for a variety of reasons, whether it be my position now or the PLNs that I have on social media that aren't just like our board, not spewing, that's the wrong word because it has such negative connotations, but, saying, okay, this is what we believe. And I do believe we're a progressive board.
Spewing can also just be volume too.
Yeah, that's true.
It doesn't have to be negative. It could just be that there's just so much.
Yeah. Then I read this article with this little girl who was like 7.5, I want to say 6.5. And her grandmother was a retired kindergarten teacher. And she started to get really nervous because this little girl wasn't reading it. She's like, I know the data and I know how hard it's going to become. And this is we're at the end of the window if she doesn't learn now. And this kid did not know how to read. And 6 months later, all of a sudden she decided, I want to learn to read. And this is very Waldorfian. And within 6 months, she was reading Harry Potter to her grandmother. 6 months, not reading to that. So that, and that really, that one article, it was a game changer for me. I actually go back to it often. I think a lot of the risk taking that you talked about earlier, and while I don't see a taker, I see myself as a risk ID. Not a word? It's not a word, but I'm an English teacher, so I can make it up. Like I have risky ideas that I'm willing to dance with that I don't think a lot of people do, because I like the challenge and I like change that I can control. So reading this article, it was like everything that I believe about education, but very little that I practice. And I think that's why, especially in this job, in this sort of new iteration of myself, think about that. And I'm like, well, if I wanted to be that, if I want that to be the reality, then I've got to do it. Like I've got to practice what I preach with it. So yeah, I stay because I believe in it. And I really, really love it. Like I really love my job. And my husband, he likes his job, but he's never had that passion. He's always had a lot of jealousy. He said, like, wow, like you just really you could do your job all day long. Like you could work 24/7. I'm like, I really could. I just really love it.
That's awesome.
So that's what keeps me there. It keeps me alive.
Okay. How about this one? I am the educator I am because.
Oh, of the educators I've had, good and bad.
Feel free to name drop. The good.
Oh yeah, I totally, yeah. And then there was this one guy.
I know.
No, but even the bad. I had some really great teachers when I was at Bayview. So Mary Jane McKelvey was my grade 9 English teacher, and I went on to become an English teacher. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't know what. And when I got to high school, I knew I wanted to be a high school teacher. Although I really think the bomb of teaching is grade 5. Like start watching all the gurus out there. 5% of them are grade 5 teachers. What is it about grade 5? True. And I have a cousin who taught grade 5.
Everything's middle school.
Yeah, no, but not even middle school's too old. Like middle school's like 6, 7, 8, 9, right? Like grade 5 is the one. I didn't think it was 5. At any rate, I have a cousin who taught 5 for years, and I said, what is it? She goes, they're young enough to still love you, but they're old enough to really learn. Totally what it is. And I think about myself in grade 5. I had a teacher, I won't even go there. We used to all leave class at the same time, and she'd find us all in the bathroom, and she'd come in and start like blowing her whistle. Anyway, wow. She was special. But anyway, so back to Mary Jane. She was Mary Jane Payne at the time, and she has a British accent, and she used to swear at us, and she was amazing. And she taught me a lot of things. I remember a lot of things I actually did in that class, books that I read, the way we learned them. But I vividly remember I sat in the back corner with the boys, and she was walking up and down the aisle showing our midterm marks. And like this is before the day of, digital marks and knowing exactly where you are at all times. And she put the paper down on my desk, and I was a French immersion kid, right? I went to immersion until grade 8. And so here I am in an English school, and I was doing well in English. I was a B student through elementary, and I was okay with that. And I had a 78, and she put the paper down, this is her grade paper, and she pointed at my mark, and the whole was like pin drop silence because she didn't speak in her class that we just didn't. And I expect this to be in the high 80s by the end of the semester, Jennifer. Quit effing around. But she actually said effing. And I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, Ms. McKelvey's going to kill me. And I'm a people pleaser. And I was like, oh, yes, ma'am. And I'll do that. And I started to realize that I only had to work a little bit harder to perform so much better. And the better I did, the better I felt. And it was this whole cycle thing. And I ended up like graduating with almost a 90% average. And I really credit her for that, to sort of spark that in me to realize I just needed to do it and have someone who I didn't really think was paying attention say something like that to me. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll do this. And I ran into her at a funeral for a former teacher. And I mentioned to her and she sort of laughed it off. And then this summer I reconnected with her on Facebook. She didn't recognize because of the changed last name. She's like, can you just jog my memory? And I haven't really changed the look so much. So I guess she didn't stalk my photos. And I told her, I said, oh, I was, this is what I did. And I gave her contact. She replied, oh, one of my favorites, Jen Bell, of course. How are you? And it was just so nice. So I had her and she was awesome. And I had Al Falkenberg, who still teaches at Bayview, actually. He's the head of English there. And he took me on as a co-op student when I was in OAC. And I was student council president. So I didn't want to go somewhere because I was student council president, but I really wanted to do the co-op because I really wanted to see the teaching and know that it was my, calling. And I know people say that and it's cliche, but I do believe people are like that. And he took me under his wing and he just trusted me. And I was like this kid in grade, in OAC, teaching grade 11s, teaching grade 9s. And he was like, yeah, Jen, go. And he let me take some risks and he let me have some failures. And that was great. And then I had a professor at Queen's, Professor Lobb was his name. And he used to give these lectures for British literature, of modern British lit. And he was a staunch old British guy and would leave every class, like having done the readings, come in and I'd listen to him and I would leave every class and we couldn't stop talking about what he said. Like it was just that, like he would ignite this sort of the thinking and the different perspective. And I loved that. Like I loved it. I had a math teacher at Bayview who I told off one day actually. And I ended up, he got really upset and we thought he was going to cry and he was yelling at some kids in the class and I thought he was out of line. So of course I had to be the martyr and be like, yeah, it's not right that you're doing this. And then I realized how like one person, and I went back the next day and I apologized because I knew I was out of line. And it ended up that this is in the days of presentation marks or participation marks, right?
Yeah.
10% participation. Well, like I don't shut up. So I always that was an easy 10% for me. And I teach English and math, so I know how to calculate my marks, especially the old way that we used to do it, right? Like 10% tests, 20% quizzes and all those. And I knew what my mark was going into the exam. I knew what my mark was on the exam. And somehow there was an 8% differential. So he gave me like a 2% for participation because of this. And it was a good lesson for me to learn that, I was in the 10th or 11th grade at the time. And we ended up, I apologized and we sort of grew and he moved on because he's an adult. And, but it was a good lesson for me to realize like sometimes you can't just stand up for the small guy and be a bully and do it that way. So that was a really good teaching lesson for me too, is to realize how to frame things delicately to reach an audience and to get things done properly. And while it wasn't the most positive experience, it was really, it stuck with me obviously for forever.
You go right there. I can tell like you're right back in each one of those teachers' classrooms again.
I absolutely was. I absolutely, I have a lot of, I'm definitely the teacher I am today. And informal teachers too, right? Like I've done sports my whole life. I was a competitive figure skater for a while. I skated with like Emmanuel Sandu and I skated with Elvis Stoico and all those guys. So like my coaches and I often go, I did cheerleading at Queen's on sort of a junior varsity kind of team with the Queen's bands. And then I started coaching, and now the prep coordinator for their pre-competitive teams. So there's like 6 teams that I work with, and the coaches, and I teach them. And just thinking about coaching that I've done and coaching that I've had, and learning from as students. One of my favorite kid stories, and I get goosebumps, and every time I tell it. I had this kid Daniel. That I worked with when I did student success. So I wasn't his teacher. I coached his sister. I worked a lot with him. I remember going to their family house and to drop something off, a project they'd forgotten, and his mom invited me and insisted I had dinner with them. They were this Italian family. And they were fantastic. And he was a kid who was taking college level courses, but really struggled. Like probably should have been a workplace level kid, but wanted to be with his friends, and really, really talented athlete, but not a really strong academic kid. And he was working on an assignment for English, and he was working with me in my office, and I was like guiding him through and trying to help him. And then I called his mom and I was like, listen, this is what you got to do. And at home, and he got it done. And she called me in the morning. She's like, okay, what's this? And he's going to hand it in. He has it. And at the end of period 2, when it was due, I ran up to, his teacher and I said, hey, did he hand it in? He looked through the pile. He's like, no, it's not here. And I said, what do you mean it's not there? Look again. And he looks at me and he hadn't handed it in. And I was ready to murder this child, like murder him. And I went, and I ran into his Italian class. And I looked at him like, you, out. And the whole kids were like, oh, Griff is going to kill you. And he came out in the hall, and I waited until most of the hall was empty. And I just stood there like staring at him, like that's like mom angry face before I was a mom. And he started looking at the ground, and I'm like, what on earth are you thinking? I worked my tail off. You worked your tail off. Your mother worked your tail. We all put all this effort into it, and then you don't hand it in. What? I can't even begin. And I just like went up one side of this kid and down the other, because like he's from the Italian family and he responded that way. You know what I mean? Like I was like assimilating almost.
Yeah.
And he's looking at the ground the whole time. I'm like, the least you can do is look me in the eye when you're talking to me, or when I'm talking to you. And he looked up, and he had tears in his eyes. And I went, what? And he goes, and I said, why didn't you hand it in? And all of a sudden he blurts out, he goes, because when it's in my bag, it's still good. And my heart breaks into 1,000 pieces. And I thought, oh my gosh. And he completely changed my assessment practices, because this put something back, and he wasn't a really good speller, and he didn't do this, and like his sentence structure wasn't great, and his ideas were okay. And he would have something that he worked his heart out for, and it would be covered in red and very little positive. And I thought, you put in 100%. And he might get a 60. Where we like, especially as an English teacher, I'm correcting all the grammar and the sentence structure and everything. And then I'm handing it back to them with all these like, oh, do this next time, do this, do this, do this, do that. And this is something that he put so much, and he was really proud of this, but he knew he was like, at most getting a 60. He's like, my best is a 60%. Like, what does that do to a kid's mental wellness?
Mm-hmm.
I used to, I didn't care about the sentence structure and that, if that wasn't the focus. I stopped correcting a lot of grammar, unless it was glaring, like certain things I have pet peeves. So I like people to use the comma properly. So I'll say like, listen, you've missed some commas. Can you just read this handout and attach them? Especially with my locally developed and applied and college level courses, I created a little handout that had a little light bulb and heart and a little heart. And I would just put 2 points in each, 2 things I loved about what you did. And it, like literally some days I was like, I don't know what to say other than maybe the font. Like sometimes you have to really stretch it. But ideas for next time, because I usually know where we're going. And I could say, okay, these were some things that they struggled on that'll probably repeat themselves on the next one. So if they consider, and it became a really good exercise, because I would have the students actually take those out, and I put them on really bright, obnoxious colored paper, staple it, and say, don't lose these. And of course they throw it into their binder, which would be messy, but I used to do binder shake. That's a whole other story. Shake the binders every Friday. And then but they knew where all their notes were, because they knew I was going to do it. So they put them in. I used to, I'm not even kidding. Ask me, I have a dance, I have a song. It's awesome. And we, I would say, go get the little green sheet or whatever color I was using that year. And they'd pull them out and say, okay, look, before we start this assignment, read the 2 suggestions, like ideas for next time, and keep those in the forefront as we move on. And then I would assign it. So he absolutely taught me that. So it's not only, teachers in the sense of those who have taught me formally, it's also those who have taught me just life lessons. Dr. Mary Coy is a huge mentor of mine. She is just retired actually out of Boise. She was my faculty advisor when I did my master's there. And I ended up being on a study. We had this, I forget, it was a big Canadian grant. It was like a $250,000 grant. And she brought teachers together, and she said, and it was all about PLNs. And how can we have professional learning networks of teachers who are passionate about teaching, but they don't have to be doing the same thing, because sometimes you're not, or sometimes you might go on a little tangent and go. And she thought, if you bring like-minded, passionate people together, they will learn. And if you give them the autonomy to do that learning, it's organic. And so that's what we would meet on, like Adobe Connect. We'd get release days. We would go down to Boise and have these symposiums for 3 days in the summer. And I'm still in touch with the people that were involved in it. And it was powerful. And this was like, the board actually removed me for a year because it didn't align with the ethics. And so it was too much release time, even though she was covering it, but it was away from, because like I got it. I also had the twins at that point. So I had I was sort of only half in 1 year. So she taught me a lot, and a lot about just thinking you want kids to do. And like, we don't need to walk them through it. One of the biggest things she taught me, I was writing a paper and I said, okay, well, how long does it have to be? She's like, well, how long do you want it to be? I'm like, well, no, how long should it be? She's like, how long do you think it should be? And she wouldn't answer questions like, well, do you think it should this? Well, do you think it should be that? And so she gave no parameters. So all of my work and the courses that I did with her, and the first course I ever did on my master's was hers. I ended up writing this 24-page paper that I lived and breathed and adored writing, because it was about what I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
not what I was supposed to learn. And I've taken that a lot into my own practice, like as much as I can. Like sometimes you have to follow what the other sections are doing in certain courses, especially in English. Like I can't say no essays when everyone else is writing 2 or 3. Like I love giving out no assignment sheet, just the rubric. Here you go. If you want a level 4, do this. I'm like, but what does it look like? I'm like, I don't know. Do you have exemplars? No. But that's good teaching practice. You have to do it. I'm like, no, I don't want you to cookie cut yourself. Like I want you to go out and learn what you want to learn and make it awesome. And students rise to it more so than when you say, okay, A and then B and then C, because we play the game of school, right? That's Christovani, her book, but I don't get it. It was one of my sort of, I don't know, canonical texts, I guess, when I teach. And she says that. She goes, kids are great at playing the game of school. I was great at playing the game of school. Okay, tell me what you want me to say, and I'll say it, and then I'll get my A, and we'll move on. And it'll be amazing, and everybody will be happy because it's easy for you, but it's not real learning. It's not authentic. And then you end up getting somewhere else in your life where that doesn't happen. So all of a sudden, I wasn't being told, well, here's what the essay has to be about. And I was like, but how am I getting? And all of a sudden I went from a 90 to like, my first paper was a 68. And I was, what? Like, no, isn't it supposed to start with the 8 and end with the 6? Like I was flabbergasted, but it was really fast learning that I had to do. And kids who feel they have to play the game of school, I like to sort of rock the boat a little bit in that sense. So, but yeah.
I love what you said before. You said, I think you said you're a risk identifier.
No, ideator. Like
ideator.
I have risky ideas.
I'm gonna write.
Yeah.
Let me write that down.
Sorry,
I think it was when the audio kicked out. So if listening to what you just shared though, like there's definitely some taking going on in there. Like it's not just thinking it up. You're delivering.
Sometimes.
So. Well,
not as much as I'd like. Let's say it that way. Not as much as I'd like.
That's where I was going to go. That's where I was going to go next. So I think about often when I think about risk and how, if I go back to the squirrel, my dog, and me.
Yeah.
My idea of sort of managing change and sort of taking on risk and all that kind of stuff entirely comes from my mom. Totally blame my mom. My dad was the.
Moms are the worst.
Yeah, my dad worked for the bank for 40 years. My mom worked wherever she could to make money for 40 years. So she worked a bunch of different jobs, and she was always very much of the mind, you do a thing, you do it well, you make some money, and you kind of move on. So I kind of know where I get my mindset from, kind of pushing my own children as well as my students, very much like you, like, yes, you can actually do an assignment just from a rubric, because you are part of the authentic learning that led up to the assessment tool. So you can create something.
And probably help me make that rubric.
Exactly. Give them a little credit, right? So where does that come from for you? Because I would call it risk taking. I mean, you call it just creating and kind of thinking about it. But where does that come from? Because it seems like you're doing it, and I think it's I know because I've worked with students like you've worked with students, and I know that type of sort of that bait and switch with students works amazingly well when it's delivered well. So where do you get that from? Where does that come from?
I don't know. I think it comes from like I mentioned, I like controlled change. I like change so long as I can control that change. So I'm one that if change is thrust upon me, I panic and I'm no good for about 30 minutes. And then once I get it all filed neatly again in my brain, because I'm very A-type in that I need things organized, then I'm like, okay, no, I'm fine. I'm totally cool with this. This is good. But for that 30 minutes, and like my husband always laughs because he's like, okay, this is a change. So I'm just going to drop this here and then I'll be back in 30 minutes once you've processed it. If you'll see, I don't see it as that, but I guess that mentality comes from seeing it. So when I'll go back to the squirrel and dog and wife analogy, I see, if you're talking about moments of change, when you were telling that story, and I wrote it down here, I said, your dog was the one who tries the change. Like, I'm just going to try this. I'm going to see if I can do it. And it's right. It's like, caution to the wind. Here I go. The squirrel was the one who had change thrust upon it. I'm pretty comfortable. Yeah, it's a dog. I can normally run and holy crap, this dog just totally caught me and is panicking, right? So it's like, here's the change, and you just got to like, you sink or swim with it. And your wife was the one that was there, caught off guard by it, not totally involved, but watching and analyzing all the change.
Mm-hmm.
And figuring out how to do something with it, knowing that she might have to do nothing. You know what I mean? Like the dog and the squirrel might figure this out without me. And it's funny because I have kind of a love-hate with squirrels, because squirrels like rip up my grass and we have this problem with the grass in the back. But I also have a great story with my Uncle Don and I were on his motorbike down in just outside Port Stanley, which is due south of London, where my dad grew up, and he took me out on this motorbike ride, and he has one of those big like Honda Goldwings. So sitting on the back, and we're going, and he's a retired biology teacher, and he was still teaching at the time down at Saunders in London. And we were driving, and we see this squirrel, and of course, squirrels, they like run and they stop in the middle of the road, and you swerve out of the way. But we're on a motorbike and we're going pretty quick. You can't swerve, and like I'm in the 11th grade or something, and we have the helmets on with the mics in them so we can chat. And he's like, okay, they say if you just go straight, they run. And if you swerve, it's when you hit them. I'm like, okay. And he goes and he hit this squirrel from the tip of its friggin' nose to the tip of its tail. It was like not even a pancake. It was like a crepe. It was like a crepe. It was like on the road, ridiculous. We had to pull over because we were both sobbing. We were so upset that we killed the squirrel. I'm like, how can you? I'm like hitting him. I'm like, how can you kill that squirrel? And he's like, I don't like squirrels. They're just like cute rats. They're rats with fluffy tails. So anyway, so back to the analogy. I sort of think moments of change and that risk. I'm your wife. I'm the spouse. I am the one who's watching it and figuring it out. I always, something new is rolled out in the board or in education. I'm like, here's version 10. I'm 10.1. So I'll sit and I'll watch, and I do this even with my cell phone. Like when the new thing comes out, and very rarely I'll be like, yeah, I'll get the bugs out of it. So if something's introduced, I'll wait until semester 2 to go. But then once I'm in it, I'm cannonballing into the swimming pool, and I'm all about it. And I'm okay with if it fails when I'm in there. I'm okay with the changes once I'm in. But I need to sit back and see something for a minute. I'm a bit of an observer before I commit.
Gotcha.
And I think in that sense, I'm the one watching the squirrel and the dog. Like they're going to figure it out for a bit, but then I'll go in there. My husband is a recruiter. So, and they do this thing called team ability. And they talk about when he started, there was 3 of them in the company that he works for, the 2 principals and him. And the one is the big idea guy. He's the guy that's like, I have this great idea. And he comes, he's all excited. He like throws the idea on the table, and then he walks out of the room. Everyone else is like, okay, I guess we're doing this. And then the other principal, so his partner is, she's like me. She's the one that you give a great idea to. I'm not going to think of the great ideas, but if I have a good idea, it's like, I don't know where I'm going with this, but do it. I can make it phenomenal. I can make it the well-oiled machine. I can build it from the ground up. But then once it gets going, I get bored. I'm like, I can't need where's he again? I need the idea guy back. Come bring me another idea. My husband he's the maintenance guy. He's the guy that will sit with that machine and love that machine and tighten all the cogs on the machine and oil it and make sure it runs really smoothly and watches it and be like, okay, this could be fine-tuned this way to make this better. And like, that's who he is. But I'm the one that, okay, give me a great idea. So again, I'm the one that will watch the dog and the squirrel sort of wrestle it out. And sometimes I might have to go in and, let the squirrel go or get the dog away, or I'm okay too with sometimes just stepping back and letting things go organically.
What does it take for you to say yes in moments like that? So when someone sort of delivers that idea to you, or you're observing the idea, what does it take you to sort of, what gets you to buy in?
Not a lot. When I was at the Faculty of Ed, I was involved in a musical at the time. It's sort of like a not so secret bucket list dream of mine is to sing like in a chorus. I don't want to be the lead or anything. Like I don't need to be Eponine and Les Mis, but I want to be like, do you hear the people sing, like on the wall climbing? Like I want to be that person, right? Like that's who I want to be. And so I was in this show, and like I can carry a tune, but I'm not Mariah Carey. I'm kind of like Mariah Carey last night. Did you watch the New Year's?
Remember I was in bed by 10:30.
You got to watch it. Like, it was epic fail. But people were saying like she gave the 2016 the end it deserved. Epic fail. It was really funny. I was in this show, and at the end of it, they based it. The 4 people who sort of ran it were from Mac, and they'd come to Queens to do Fac Ed. They had done a lot of like musical theater when they were at Mac. And so they brought a lot of their traditions. And one of the things was on dress rehearsal night, at the very sort of end of the dress rehearsal, they gave out awards, and they were literally paper plates that they decorate with like pasta, like kindergarten. It was hilarious. Exactly. And everyone got an award for something, because you can honor someone in every way. And it's sort of that like millennial mentality of everyone gets an award but they actually legitimately did it. And I got the I'll do that award. I'll do that. Because that's why, and I catch myself all the time. Someone will say something like, yeah, I'll do that. I will do pretty much anything for anyone that I love to help and I love to do. So it doesn't really take a lot. If you give me something good, if you give me something even mediocre, I'm like, yeah, I'll try it. Like I like to try new things. Because like I said, I get bored with the status quo, and I like change that I can control. Mm-hmm. And so if you say, oh, do you want to do that? I will absolutely give it a try. I can't guarantee it'll be I can guarantee it'll be the best work, because that's what I do. It might take me hours upon hours and days upon days to get it done to the standard that I want to get it done. But I'll do pretty much anything. It's very rare that I say no. It's in fact, when I was pregnant with my first, I actually had to put a Post-it note on my wall in front of like on my desk, where I sort of like was based out of when I was doing student success, that just said, say no. Because I knew like it was beyond my capacity, because what I would want to give was at what cost, like my own cost for my health, for the baby. And because I pushed myself, and I couldn't at that point, because it wasn't just about me. Now with the kids, I've got there's times where I'm like, I don't have to do this. I don't have to coach the cheerleading team and be the Beaver Scout leader, and it's saying I don't need to run that club and this club and that committee and this, and like let's build capacity. But yeah, basically if someone asks me to do something, if it's something that I can see being able to fit, like it's not like, oh, in an hour can you do this, and can you teach how to code in an hour? Well, not really, because I got to learn a lot of that myself. But hey, can you run hour of code for York Region, like sort of be the point person? And this is a month out. Yeah. Okay. I'll learn how to code, and and I did. Like that's one of the things I did this year. So yeah, it doesn't actually take a lot. I just like good ideas.
I had a conversation with a colleague just before the break, and I'm similar to you, that ideator, and there's a very short distance between it occurring in my head and it coming out my mouth. But I have to trust my instinct, because I trust that I'm constantly taking in little kind of notes and nuances and flags and bits of information. And somehow it's kind of like, what was somebody saying? That, that's the purpose of sort of like the dream journal, because with the dream journal, if you can train yourself to wake up, your brain is still working on projects that you're not aware of.
Your little IBQ Post-it note that I saw on Twitter, that was hilarious.
So that whole thing of like, letting your brain kind of work on things, so that when you do kind of just blurt, it can be disruptive for people, but it's not disruptive to your own kind of process, because you actually have been giving this some thought. And someone was saying to me, that I say yes often, and I say yes quickly. And my sort of reflection back to them, I said, and I noticed that you say yes often and quickly when it's for the students, but you don't often say yes quickly when it's for you. And I think there's a real interesting difference there, where we're almost sometimes as teachers will take that risk on behalf of the kid, but not as quick to do it when there's something that we could do for ourselves.
No. Well, and I think a lot of that comes back to the whole idea of we're so critical as a group, because we critique all day, right? All we do all day is give feedback to students, and often I'll say negative, although I don't know if that's the exact word I want to use, because it's not quite constructive, but it's like, okay, this is how you do better, and which can be demoralizing. Going back to Daniel's thing, right? When it's in my bag, it's still good. When it's in my classroom and the door is closed, it's good. But you get any feedback, it's like the judgment comes in. And as teachers, we're so used to having control, because we are the sage on the stage, and I will say, and no one will question because I know more. Right? There's a lot of teachers who don't like to put the risk up out of fear of judgment, because people are going to think, they're going to think I'm a fraud, or they're going to think I'm this, or they're going to think I'm not a very good teacher. I don't know what I'm talking about, or they're not going to trust me and what I believe are my strengths, and maybe they don't see it because they know more than me. And there's a lot of fear. Teachers are very fearful of being vulnerable with one another, and I think that comes to it's almost detrimental to us as professionals. Not almost, it is. It is detrimental to us as professionals because we need to take those risks. We need to be vulnerable and we need to trust in one another. And if you can find a group, a department, a grade level, a partner, whoever that you can do that with, you need to hang on to that PLN with all your might, because that's how you grow as a professional. And that's how our students, be it in a classroom or student, like just different learners, like you're in your PLN, that's how we will better education. And that's how that broken system that I was talking about earlier will start to remedy. And then it'll look broken again in another way, because again, the universe will become a bit bigger and we'll go. Like, I don't think it's ever fixable, and I don't think it should be.
But we can achieve some balance.
Right? Like, absolutely.
So then for, me having the conversation with my colleague about, saying yes for yourself and being just a little bit slower in what you're actually saying no about, how would you advise someone to sort of get out of their own way? So when they're sort of, there's certain, my original question I was going to ask you is like, what sort of changes do you feel like you're actively a part of, and what sort of changes are you actually standing in the way of? But I think,
that's huge.
But I think a better way to look at it is if someone were sort of obviously not saying yes to something.
I've had.
How would you get somebody to get out of their own way, basically?
Okay, so I'll frame it in this. So I used to be the teacher liaison for York University for our students, right? All of our TCs, or I forget, the professional education partners is the last thing that they were being called, which I was like, okay, whatever, different box, same product. And I would be the one to go around and like shoulder tap. Hi, do you want to take a student teacher? Hi, do you want to take a student teacher? And I'm kind of pushy. And because I say yes to a lot of people, I think people feel they owe me things, which I don't like. I don't say yes because to get the favor. I'm not one of those people. I say yes because I think it'll, do better for the world. So that's why I'm going to do it. And maybe not, maybe it won't do better. Maybe people would disagree with that, but maybe my husband sometimes when I'm like up at 1 a.m. exhausted and grumpy the next day. But I think in that sense, I would go around and they'd be like, oh no, I can't take one. And I would just say, well, why? And not because I thought I knew the answer. I wanted to know. And I was genuinely interested to hear why they didn't feel they could. And for some, it was like, oh, they're more work than they're worth. I'm like, well, tell me a bit about that. Why do you think that? So I think that in order to get people out of that, like just say no, is to challenge their thinking without coming across as being challenging, because there's a difference between being challenging and to challenge someone. They're different verbs. Those verb tenses are very, very different. And the linguist in me sees that, right? Because like I said, I went to French immersion. I took Spanish, I took Italian. I speak all these languages. So I see this. And for me, it was just to have them reflect. And in some cases, I would never change them. But sometimes people are like, okay, you know what? I will. And a lot of it was fear. Like, I don't want them to get in here and think that I don't know what I'm doing. And how am I going to be able to, I don't think I have the resources to give them to do this. And I would be able to say, I'm like, well, from what I've heard from either people in your department or from kids, like, this is really cool. You do this, it's really cool. You do this. I've noticed this in meetings. I'd love to learn that from you. And it's a lot of just confidence building, like we do in our students, right? Our strategies for teaching are no different than our strategies for just good people skills. Yeah,
I would agree. For sure. I think about when you were talking about doing your master's and you're sort of the instructor that
I'm a killer.
Yeah, but you know what? I think there's something when your brain is kind of like open to receiving the signal, maybe not the knowledge, but the signal. Because I had an instructor that was all up in constructivism, and I hated him. But I think what I hated was, and I thought of, one of the things I actually love right now about change in education is the ambiguity that it causes. I love the, not necessarily knowing where something's going to go next, and just waiting for that one next moment just to see what happens. And because often we sort of hit the stop button just before something really interesting happens, or something notable, or something even hilarious, or even the breaking of the sort of like the uncomfortable silence, and you come out the other side and you're sort of back into it again. And he never he never let go of it. And I felt like he was, and I'm not even sure, like it's almost, he was so constructivist. I don't even know if he knew how to teach. he was so withdrawn in his approach to just saying, you need to sort of design. He was sort of like, you design your world in this. I'm like, no, I think there's some curriculum documents I have to follow. He's like, well, no, but there's that. And then there's, as far as talking about the people that I know have impressed me, and sort of, like I said, I really think of there's a difference between the instruction, the content, and the signal. And I think probably my best teachers are the ones that hit me and got my signal. Like they knew how to just kind of rattle my cage a bit enough that I found a way back to the content. I may have never really liked how they taught, never went there, but I knew enough then. They had me sort of, like you kind of said, you got the wheel spinning. Give me another new thing. Give it to me.
Yeah.
Give that sort of that whirlwind, that Fred Flintstone foot motion going. Give me a little bit of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and that Flintstoning idea is huge in design thinking, right? Like the future design schools, they talk about Flintstoning all the time, and the idea of you create this a prototype and then you rapidly experiment with it. It doesn't need to be the full car where you have the motor. It's like, okay, well, here's the shell and let's see what can happen. And you go, and if it didn't work, it's okay. You didn't get to the end of the prototype, and it's not your final product, because it can't be, because you've got to test it so many times. So don't put a whole lot of idea into the beginning. It goes back to Ditch Summit, right? Noah Giselle, his whole or Geisel, sorry, his thing was what was it? Don't get ready, get started. And he was talking about how he feels that teachers put way too much time into the planning, and they invest all this that we lose sight of where it might go. So get it started, have the framework, put the scaffolding there, but then just do it. Ask, jump, risk, share, try, like be audacious was his message. And it was so great to me. Like, we want our students to be free and critical thinkers, but we don't give them the freedom. And so there's this I don't know, like the unbalance in what we do in our teaching. We don't do that. You always want to like give the kids the ideas, or your learners, whether they be kids or not, ideas, and watch them grow with it and have it like as a big group, right? Like Frankenstein it almost, and then see where it goes. And Frankenstein went on to become a pretty famous novel. So, like that first iteration might be all right.
God, you're making me think a lot of things. I had another conversation with another, no, that's okay. I don't mind thinking. Another conversation around, when you're trying to bring that, if you move from the sort of the idea thinker into you're the one that actually has to deliver it. I find myself often in that conversation, and I love the being met with as if in the things that I present. And what I mean by that is, for example, I was in a discussion about 20% time in Genius Hour, and the value of allowing students that creative freedom to sort of, I framed it as to teach me and teach the class something, because that was my end game, is that if the kid was given the opportunity to sort of do something of high interest, passion project, something just, that they were curious about, that ultimately the class would benefit from it. And of the 5 people that I spoke to, for them, their immediate as if statement was, so what you're saying is that you're just not going to teach for a period. And
oh my goodness.
But I'm okay with that, because part of that is, and it's soft numbers, right? I'm not doing any sort of deep analysis here, but if that is and this wasn't all in one place that I had this conversation, but if this is kind of where we're mired with some of these really cool opportunities, then that completely plays into, us as the lead creator, not modeling creativity, not modeling really safe risk taking. Like, what are we talking about here? A kid is going to willingly take their period and skip. They're going to take a period and not show up. So why can't we have a conversation? Well, if I let you come to class and bring your guitar, or doodle with your Sharpies for a period, like, so it's interesting.
But that's that to me is interesting, because that's your, what would you call them, your as if statements. It's like, oh, so you're just not going to teach. I think that's, when done properly, are are the best teaching. Like that's what kids are going to remember. That's what they're going to take. They're going to.
But what I take from that, and I get that part. What I take from that is there's the space. What did someone say? Like it's sort of like that's the farmland that the seed's being planted in. So there's some. We're going to have to sort of like scorch the earth here and start over to a certain degree, because that's a. And I think part of what
very
I blame,
fixed mindset.
It is. I think part of it is, another part of it too is, I've spent a little bit of time using Twitter and sort of existing outside our school board and meeting people that have nothing to do with our school board and seeing some of them.
And I think that's so rich. It's so rich.
It is. I think it's you can't go back. No. Like you can't go back to those old ways of thinking.
You can't. And you know what? I find being on Twitter, and I'm far more active like this fall than I've ever been. I actually went back to look. And I was on it for chats every now and then I would go, but especially in the last 2 weeks, like Twitter's really exploded for me. Just talking to people, I don't need to choose my words as carefully as I do within our own district, because like, okay, well, if I say that, is it going to be interpreted like this or that? Like you can just sort of speak freely. Like there's a Dutch proverb that says, what the heart is full of comes out the mouth. And I feel sometimes and I don't think it's an education thing, like just in life, professionally, you really need to guard yourself with what you're saying, career limiting moves, this sort of thing. And provided that you're professional about it, you can just sort of say that. You can be like, well, I just think this. And it can be radical. It can not be radical. It can just be a thought. But there's something about the anonymity of Twitter too, that they don't really know who you are, right? So again, that fear of judgment is sort of removed, because if they don't like you, they just don't follow you, which is good and bad, right? Like the whole idea of.
Okay, 2 last things I want to throw your way.
Okay.
You had mentioned, well, we've talked about having a PLN, and you name dropped some of, people, voices from the past that have sort of helped make the teacher that you are right now.
Yeah.
If you were to assemble a master class of teachers that would speak to new teachers coming into the board.
Oh goodness, yeah.
Could you throw down 2 or 3 that you think would just, the ones that are there on the edge, the ones that have that sort of high interest, the ones that you think would be, and you know what, you did this to yourself because you mentioned the end tip thing. So that's what I wrote down. I knew I wanted to come back to that. I wrote it down just up at the top here, just above your picture, by the way. So there's a little, just above you, somewhere up there it says end tip.
I always say, okay, my students used to say, when I'd say something like, wow, miss, you're smart. And I'm like, yeah, and pretty. And they burst out laughing. And I'm like, and funny. That's always my comment. And whenever anyone says, you're smart, I'm like, yeah, and pretty.
So who would you bring in?
Oh, that's really hard. I saw that when I previewed, and I thought, I've been thinking about that a lot. And it would change. I guess if I'm thinking in our board alone, let's say, and my biggest influencers to get me where I am now, I'm throwing out Rich McPherson would absolutely be on that list. Nadia Bearcroft would be on that list. Teresa Meikle would be on that list, and Kathy Costello would be on that list. They're all.
Can you say why?
Yeah, absolutely. They're all in English, so they speak to my roots. And they all had a really big impact on shaping me and my beliefs. And they were people that I would sit and listen and to speak, and I would be awestruck with their ideas, with their passions, with their risk taking, with their ability to bring people together and create a united action. All of them. So Kathy Costello taught me OAC English, and then she went on to become. They were all at one point English curriculum consultants, and so I've had a lot of dealings with them. And Kathy she was a small. Do you know Kathy? She was a small. She passed actually a number of years ago now.
It's funny. I think I met her once because I think she was a head at Williams. I think my spouse is a teacher as well.
Okay.
She was at Williams, I think, for 1 or 2 years with her back in like 2002, 2003, maybe. So I know of the name. And of course, I've looked at enough English textbooks to see her name. And
her name on
like,
a lot. Yeah.
I know her. Yeah.
Yeah. She had to me an incredible ability to read something and retain it. And she would see it, she would retain it, she would twist it to make it fit, not twist it, that's right. She would bring it up at just the poignant moment, like, oh, and then there was this. Like, she just had this head of full of rich knowledge that I just adore. I find Rich McPherson is the same. What I love about Rich is you don't find anyone who says, oh, I don't really have time for him, I don't care for him. Like, there's always someone that's, there's no naysayers. Everyone loves Rich because he's just so, he says what he means and he means what he says. And he'll challenge people in such a respectful way. And he thinks and he sees things from such different angles. I adore working with him. He makes you feel instantly comfortable and listened to. Like, when I'm with him, I feel like he is there with me. He's not distracted. And I really admire that in people, especially in these days where it's really fast paced.
Yeah, exactly.
Is a guru with assessment. I was doing something about Google Sheets up in curriculum. A couple of weeks ago, we have mandated learning times, which some people don't like. I love, because I just sit with people in curriculum and we all talk about things that we know and love. So, and Nadia brought something. I said something. She's like, well, I'm concerned about that from an assessment point of view, right? She's the assessment coordinator. And she started talking about this, and she pulled out this thing about the achievement chart and like just the resources that she had and how she can speak to what rich assessment looks like. And again, going back to Daniel and what matters and what doesn't. She to me is like, if there's someone that you need to talk to. And I said, can you share some of this with me? She created this little like folder and shared it with me in the Google Drive. And I was like, it was like, 2 or 3 days before Christmas. And I was like, Santa kid. I know. I was like, can I please share this with people? She's like, absolutely. So I've shared it with a few people who love her. And it's funny when I sit in rooms, because Rich and Nadia are still there. I have a few friends who I'll be like, guess who I'm sitting with right now? And they're like, I'm so jealous of you in this moment. And then Teresa Meikle.
A Twitter back channel.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it's like. And Teresa Meikle, who's retired, but I think she comes back, she retires on contract. She often does now elementary vice principalships. Is just someone who has such a commanding presence. And again, would just speak her mind. And I have a lot of admiration for people who don't need to be political, because she has such passion for education and passion for students doing well and achieving. And if she didn't agree with something, she's like, I don't agree with that. I think it should be this way, against ministry, but in the same note, when she believed in something that was in the curriculum, when she believed in something like a policy from the ministry, from the board, from our district, she would wholeheartedly go on that too. Like, she just has such conviction that I find so admirable. The thread that weaves them together is they're just phenomenal character. And if we go back to, when I started teaching, a decade and a half ago, and that whole character matters thing, those tenets of character are so alive in each of them that I think I can speak to people that I'm like, oh, I think they would be, but those are people that I would pull together, because I think it's hard to say about teachers, like, oh, they're a great teacher. I hear teachers saying that, oh, they're such a great teacher. And I pause. I'm like, and I sometimes often ask, but sometimes I think to myself, I'm like, well, how would you really know that? Like, because I can do a really good song and dance. It doesn't mean that I'm really great in the classroom. You never really know. So unless, like, I have one teacher, Espo Schifoni, who is the head of math at Maple, who I resourced in his class. And I learned more about teaching math, resourcing 3 days a week in his class, than I could ever have learned in any course or at the faculty or anywhere. He was just in a different level. The things that he would do and how he would get to the students, and his knowledge of math, his ability to connect with the kids. So unless I've actually lived it and seen it and been influenced myself, I don't think I could recommend. So those would be the 4 that I would pull together and, have that, like, sit down. It would be a dinner table where I would be able to sit and not really say anything for a couple of hours. That's and awesome. That, my friend, would take a lot.
That's awesome.
Because I love talking. Yeah.
You mentioning that math instructor reminds me of Sean Perry. Have you met Sean?
Sean was the VP at Maple when I was there for the last year and a half. And Sean and I went to high school together.
So Sean
and I took grade 10 art together.
When I first started at Williams
he was math there.
Being so green, right? I'm like, okay, you know what? I need to get out. I got to get away from my constructivist faculty teacher to see how the real world works. And Sean was gracious enough. He was one of the teachers that I approached. And I said, hey, can I come and sit in your classroom? And without even a pause, he's like, yep, come on by. And I still totally remember like Pascal's triangle. And I've never encountered that again. I've never encountered that patterning ever again. But right. I remember how smart I felt coming out of there. And I teach math because I'm alt ed, but I am not a math teacher. I'm language, I'm concepts, I'm sort of words and text, images if I can. And it's really fun to teach math because that's my starting point. But I don't get the rigor of it right away. And I just thought, I've complimented him.
I was going to say, please tell me you've told him that, because I don't think we do that enough as teachers or in life. And I do not think we give people credit. I think we're too quick to criticize and give and almost insult in a joking way. And one of my New Year's resolutions, as much as I hate making them, I feel I sort of have to, is to stop doing that. Like, instead of teasing in a negative way, like being like, oh, you met this clown? Like, oh God, you hate working with him, even though you mean you love it. Like, don't say that. Be like, have you met him? Because he's like crazy amazing and you need to know him. Like, we need more of that.
And it is the as if moment at the table. You hold it there until the moment changes to, you get through that ambiguity. Okay, they're not joking. They actually really do love working with this individual. Yeah. And then you've got somebody that believes, right? Yeah. So absolutely. I've told him, I've complimented him a few times and tagged him in and said, oh yeah, you know what? Here's a VP that totally, walks the talk, and he let me come into his classroom and he opened his door and I got to learn math from him. Yeah. Okay.
And he's great at that.
There's the last one. Here's the last one.
Okay. In our 4-hour-long podcast.
I know. Eh? Well, I think it's only been an hour and change, which is fine, which is good. Hey, someone's going to listen. Okay, so
someone's got a long
commute. here's a quote for you. Okay, I want to end this on a quote, and you can take it in whatever direction you want. Okay.
Okay.
So, dude's name is Alvin Toffler, and his quote, what he said is, "Change is the process by which the future invades our lives." And I was previously going to ask you actually, I know I said I wasn't going to go through the whole list of questions, but you managed to flow through a bunch of them. Seriously, go back through the list after this.
And see how many I did.
And see how you dance through it. I'm like, I have little check marks. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go all around. It's like the craziest frenetic lesson plan I've ever had, right? Because I was going to ask you questions like, how has teaching changed you? I was going to ask, how your view of education now versus then, all this kind of stuff. But now we kind of end at, let's bring it back to, that idea of change.
Aids and future into our lives.
Yeah. What does that mean to you?
The word invade makes me think of aliens. It's not weird.
That's okay.
Say it again.
Change is the process by which the future invades our lives.
I like that quote. I like short and simple quotes, though. I also love quotes, English teacher. I think it's true because I think I think they're totally wrong. No, I think he's onto something. Because it is change. I've never thought of it as change being future. I've just thought of it being different. I don't know. I guess they're not as mutually exclusive as I thought. There's so many levels to that. It's like a little onion of a quote, isn't it? You can peel back so many layers. Like, you can go superficially and just be like, oh yeah, because when we change, it becomes new, and when it becomes new, then now we're out of the past and we're into the new, which was the future then. But I think you can go deeper. Like, I keep going back to that word invades, and the idea of the alien and the unknown intruding on, and the ideas of fear around that, and the idea of how we're scared, but we don't necessarily need to be, because it's just the unknown. And what is it about the unknown? Because I think most fears and phobias that people have aren't of anything but fear itself. And not knowing. We just want to know, right? We're scared of spiders because we don't know if it's going to bite us or if it's going to feel creepy on our skin. I think the quote really speaks to the idea that we almost need to embrace change to have any sort of forward movement. In order to become better, or not even better, because I don't think change, yeah, it does. Because even if it's a failed change, we've learned from that. And going back to like the math teacher that I told off as the, like, I'm the martyr of the classroom. So if we can keep in mind that this change is okay because it's going to get us to the next step. And like I said to you earlier, I really believe that everything happens for a reason. And I sort of like to sit back and let the fates run their course and decide where I'm going to go. I think that does that. Change is these little aliens that come in and might scare us at first, but will propel us into that sort of sci-fi world that we're destined to be in. I don't know. Is that corny?
No,
It seems
that works
kind
for
of corny to me. All right, I'll go with that.
That's the Rorschach test.
I'll tweet. Oh, great! It's like the ink blot. Now I'm like a crazy murderer. Like, see, my husband was right. My sketch notes are just like crazy.
Verbal.
I'm gonna turn into a psychopath.
No, I remember mine were the ones with the random sort of schizophrenia in them, right? So.
Yeah.
And I understood yours.
I'm gonna think about that more. Yeah, there we go. I'm gonna think about that more. I bet you I'm gonna tweet you a couple times. Be like, no, I changed my answer to this. Yep. But
I get hung up on the process part. I don't get hung up on the invade, because for me it's I exist a little bit more in the what are the subtle clues? What are the subtle things that sometimes we don't notice? Yeah. Maybe because we are too focused on the big round eyes and the saucers falling from the sky. Right. what did I notice? And not
the beautiful pattern of light that's being made on the ground around you.
Yeah, it could be, or the 5-tone song that's playing. But yeah, for me, it is about the process. I get the invasion. I can accept the invasion. But what is it that I hope to notice about the process so that I can feel like I'm playing a part in it?
Interesting. Yeah. Process is big, right? The old, wasn't it Aerosmith, Life's a Journey, Not a Destination? Wasn't that one of the lines from one of their songs?
I thought that was Tom Cochrane.
That could be him too. I don't know. They probably a lot of them. So, Life is a Highway. Was it in that too? No, it's definitely Aerosmith says it. I'm trying to think of the name of the song.
Now's your last chance to get that song in.
Yeah, I'm not going to sing it. I'm only big on Broadway.
So throw down for the listeners. Where can you be found? If people want to connect with you, they want to find you. Where can you be found?
Well, you come to home. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, exactly. I get all these people ringing my doorbell.
You will, sure.
I like my new tweeps. I'm at virtual GIF, GIFF, not a single F because my last name's Giffen. Okay. There, I blog-ish. I did my crazy blogging in November, where I wrote a blog a day, which was exhausting, but I loved it. It was a great activity.
They're good. They're good.
They're okay, thanks. They were a good first attempt at them. I'm proud of the first attempt, but I'm gonna love them when I look back and I laugh because I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a blog. That's hilarious. But I'm proud that I did it. So, and that's virtualgif.blogspot.ca. I was gonna do Medium, and in hindsight, I kind of wish I had, but I liked the interface with Google and with all the googliness that we do.
Yeah, me too.
I'm on Instagram at virtualgift as well, but I don't actually Insta a lot. I want to start doing that more, but I don't know what that's going to look like. I also kind of want to start a Snapchat about education with that handle too, because I think it's powerful just in a lot of ways and reach a different audience. And it's not being tapped into in education because it's kind of seen as dumb, because it is kind of dumb. I kind of really hate it, but I think I can do something with it. So that might come maybe. That look.
The whole Snapchat thing for me is a little bit like it's like the dog grabbing me. I feel like the squirrel on it. Like it's sort of like reality changing. I want to try it, but I don't know. Yeah. I don't know where it works.
You're the squirrel. Someone just needs to force you. Like me. Like I got squirreled. I got squirreled into Snapchat. I'm not even kidding you. My best friend is a digital marketer, and she was like, "What do you mean you're not on Snapchat? You're a high school teacher." I'm like, she goes, "That's your whole audience." She goes, "I'm on Snapchat. Of course I'm on Snapchat all the time, because this is like, I've got to understand that so that when we market to those people," and she explained to me, I'm like, okay, I'll get on Snapchat. And I went, I still don't get it. The other time I get a snap from her, I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm like, who am I going to snap? You know who I'm going to have on there is like the kids I used to coach that I'm still in.
I know. It's totally it.
No, the big way to get in touch with me is absolutely Twitter at virtualgif. I go through fits and spurts. Sometimes I'll, flood with a whole bunch of stuff, and then I'll be silent for a few days and be taking things in. But I think it's a great PLN. I'm always like checking in to see if people are asking me questions, and I'm sharing things there. And yeah, I like the passion on Twitter, and I only use it for school related, like education related things. Like I promise I will not take a picture of my my dinner and tweet about that. I won't tell you when my kids and I are going to the zoo and how we saw the pandas or anything. Like that's my Facebook. That's my personal life. It's all, in fact, my kids barely make an appearance. Although my oldest did this week when we went to the art gallery, but that was education related because we were talking about learning and art, and it was pretty awesome. We had a great time.
I do the same. I keep the kids. Twitter for me is my professional sort of tool, and Facebook, Instagram. Instagram can exist somewhere between, but Facebook goes all sort of like personal. So
yeah, same. So yeah, the Twitters, I love it. And I'm on Google Plus. I don't know what my Google Plus handle is. Isn't that terrible? I think it's Jennifer Giffen 77.
I can probably find it. I get to say this. I'll put it in the blog notes.
Oh my God, you put it in the show notes. Woohoo! Look at us.
So
all
official.
Fancy and stuff.
All right. You're the best. Thanks for chatting with me.
Thanks for asking me. I'm super excited.